Mega Man 8 was a very divisive game for long-time fans, and while I can see where they were coming from, I found some level of enjoyment from the game, both in graphics, which I thought was stellar, and level design, which was pretty creative, if a little hit or miss. But for most, the game was seen as a failure, and it still is to this very day, so it's safe to say the classic series was dead. That was until our favourite blue shooty guy made his return with Mega Man 9 during the 7th generation of consoles. Although it technically wasn't a return because the year before we not only got ZX Advent but also Star Force 2. But for home consoles it was most definitely a return, especially for Mega Man Classic, who hadn't seen the light of day for over a decade. But the question is, was this a successful return, or was it just another nostalgia-baiting cash grab?
Well, I can definitely say it wasn't. Kinda. It's always hard to tell with these things, especially since it's been so long since the game was released, and certain things get lost to time, such as the thoughts and opinions of the fans, and the context of the release. But from what I can tell, at the time, Mega Man 9 was seen as a return to form, receiving a fair amount of critical praise for harkening back to the glory days of games like 2 and 4. This was actually by design because around this time, the retro revival was slowly building up. NES and SNES nostalgia was at an all-time high, and both indie and AAA developers would spend the next few years creating games that call back to this bygone era to massive success. In fact, it's still going on, with other old school eras getting some love in recent years, like the 5th generation. But at the time, the whole retro being cool again thing was brand new, so a lot of people loved this and found it refreshing, a return to the glory days some might say. If you are someone who was alienated by games like Mega Man 7 and 8, you'll probably feel right at home here, especially if you're a Mega Man 2 fan, because this game is just as easy as that game can be at times. Don't get me wrong, it still has a healthy dose of that trademark blue bomber bullshit we expect from the classic series, particularly in the wily stages. But it's minimal and is usually there in the form of a tricky puzzle, rather than fucked up enemy placement like 3, or a snowboarding section that requires pixel perfect precision like 8. As you can see from the footage, the gameplay and general game design isn't the only thing that harkens back to the NES games. The entire presentation is basically a one-to-one replication of entries 1 to 6. The graphics are back to being 8-bit, and so is the music, which, as always, is absolutely top tier. While I will always prefer the more refined and dynamic style found in 8 when it comes to the graphics, the 8-bit style is undoubtedly the most iconic, so bringing it back was definitely the right move for the time. But going back and replicating what Mega Man 2 did right also had its drawbacks, mainly in the form of Mega Man's moveset. In this game, Mega Man loses moves like the charge shot and slide, which I was initially going to complain about because they were both such great additions. But now that I think about it, they were made up for in both the combat and level design, both things that the charge shot and slide improved respectively. Starting with the combat, we've got one of the best selections of weapons in the entire classic series. The black hole bomb, the tornado blow, the hornet chaser, all great weapons that make up for a lack of a charge shot. And in terms of level design, this game has to be one of the smartest and most well thought out when it comes to this aspect of game design. That's not to say the other classic series games aren't expertly crafted or anything, but to me, this one stood out the most in terms of how levels present players with challenges, opting to ease players in and give them warning signs ahead of time so more vigilant players can plan and act accordingly. It's genius level design, and while it contributes to this game being easier than some of the older ones, I don't think it's too big a trade-off. Especially since it gives us room to appreciate the other things this game does right, like giving us some cool Robot Master designs 9 games in, including our first female Robot Master in Splash Woman. Almost all of these guys go down pretty easily in all honesty, but it's okay because they come back a little harder in their rematches at the end of the game. In fact, that's where most of the difficulty is stacked in this game, right at the end in Wily's Fortress, and it's not out of nowhere either. It's a nice, slow, steady build, contrary to the typical classic series trends.
I think the biggest compliment I can give to this game is that it's fair and well designed. But I'm somewhat cautious of saying that because it does come with some level of BS, as I said earlier. But by and large, this game is fun, fair and intense, a great time for veterans and newcomers alike. So if you're looking for a gateway game to get you into Mega Man Classic, this is one of your best options.